Assalamu alaikum. The question is, how do Islamic fundamentalist groups typically govern territories they control? This is a big question because in Islam, we're ordered by Allah in verse 544, and whoever does not judge by what Allah has revealed, then it is those who are the disbelievers. So we are ordered in the Quran and multiple other places to rule by what Allah has revealed in the Quran and the authentic hadiths. Islamic law, Sharia law, is how we govern our territories that we have control over. We don't have to be the majority. We just have to have the power to do it. When he's saying Islamic fundamentalist groups, he's basically just saying Muslims, because if you don't believe in Islamic law, then you're not a Muslim at all. You're a disbeliever. You're a kafir. Unless you're ignorant. If you're ignorant, you don't understand that Islamic law is not optional. It's the law of the Muslims. You have to implement it if you're in power, and you have to believe in it. If you're not, at least bare minimum, believe that it is the superior law, better than democracy, communism, monarchies, all that stuff, man-made laws in general. And you're only ignorant until you're shown the evidence. If this verse is shown to you and you still believe that, then you're not a Muslim anymore. So it's a very serious issue, because preferring other systems than what Allah has ordered and revealed is shirk, basically. So how do we typically govern these territories? Well, first, we can use Ali, may Allah be pleased with him, the fourth caliph and the son-in-law of the Prophet ﷺ, as an example. When Uthman ibn Affan, the third caliph, radiallahu anhu, was assassinated by the Khawarij, which is a deviant and extremist group of a different sect of Islam, kind of like ISIS. They executed him, and then Ali became the new caliph. And he implemented a good portion of Islamic law immediately, because the population was conditioned to accept it. And Muawiyah, may Allah be pleased with him, came to Ali, may Allah be pleased with him, and asked him to he wanted revenge on all those who participated in the assassination of Uthman, because Muawiyah, may Allah be pleased with them, was a relative of his. So in Islam, we have an eye for an eye, a life for a life. The Muslim can choose to forgive the murderer or take revenge in the same manner that they killed the victim. So if you kill someone by shooting them in the head, then we give the family a gun, and they get to shoot that guy back in the head. If it's a drowning, the family gets to drown that person to death. So Muawiyah wanted revenge on those who killed his relative, and that was his right. And Ali agreed, may we be pleased with him, but he said, let me consolidate my power first. I just became the leader. So he wanted to consolidate power, kind of like what we're seeing in Syria, right? All these groups were divided, and now they're kind of uniting now, and they're trying to consolidate power. You can't implement all of Islamic law immediately until the population is educated and conditioned to accept it, or you're going to have these ignorant people rising up and fighting us. So first, conditioning. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned, Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, in another hadith mentioned that if the first verse that came from Allah was to give up fornication, the people would have continued doing it. If it was to give up alcohol consumption, the people would have continued doing it, etc., etc. Adultery, they would have continued doing it because they weren't conditioned. It took 10 to 20 years of conditioning before they could accept all of Islamic law. This is something Muslims need today. We need to educate Muslims today about the importance of Islamic law. When we're not talking about like a 50-year journey towards implementing it, just a couple years maybe, or a couple months maybe, and then you have to implement all of it, right? So that's how we get the process of Islamic law established in a territory that we conquer, or a territory that we are already governing over a population that's ignorant, possibly, potentially, due to corruption or whatever. So it's done over time through education and whatnot. And we can talk about Islamic law itself, because the questioner is asking, how is it, what is Islamic law? How do we govern the territories with it? And this is a huge discussion, because it's like, imagine going to law school. You have to learn everything about, the law, and, but we can touch upon some points. So the reason why Islamic law is the best system on earth is for a variety. And let's compare it alongside democracy, because democracy is the popular system today, secularism, democracy. Let's look at democracy. So under a democracy, you have to pay lawyers tens of thousands of dollars to get justice. That's why the rich people, they get off scot-free with punishments, and the poor, they're punished. And also these trials last years and years and years, right? It doesn't, maybe 10 years sometimes. In Islamic law, the trials could be finished in one day. Everything's done. You got the evidence, bam. No evidence, okay, we can't arrest you. And you don't have to pay tens of thousands of dollars for a lawyer. You could be given, there's usually just you, a judge, and there could be like a person who gets the, a detective that gets the evidence, presents it, blah, blah, blah. And then if you're guilty, you're guilty. If not, then bam, that's it. There's no loopholes in the law. The laws aren't always changing in Islam. That's another flaw in democracy. The laws are always changing. So sometimes people don't even know what the law is anymore. And so many people in these democracies get arrested for things they don't even know is wrong, So, and when you have an always changing law or ambiguous law that has loopholes, then that means that government can arrest you for anything, and they can use one of the loopholes or the ambiguity of a law to call you a criminal. They can get rid of people who are dissident. So this is another flaw of democracy. Another flaw of democracy is that all of them are corrupt, because all of them remove church and state, right? So there's no religion in the government. When you have no religion in the government and no God-fearing men in the government, they don't believe they're held accountable to anyone, Whereas in Islamic law, the best Muslim is the leader of the Muslim. A benevolent dictatorship is what Islamic law is. And there's no term limit, like in democracy. We don't have to keep spending hundreds of millions of dollars every 4 years for campaigning, marketing, all these people donating to this instead of the poor, right? Another flaw there. And bribing, that happens during these democracies when these politicians are campaigning, they accept bribes or donations from corporations, and they don't even, work towards you anymore. They work towards the people who are donating to them. So that's another flaw of democracy. In Islamic law, the previous caliph chooses the next one, or the Islamic scholars choose the next caliph, or let's say two caliphs are fighting and one conquers the other, then he becomes the caliph. So these are the three ways an Islamic leader is established. And because he does fear Allah and he implements Islamic law, he's not making his own laws that benefits him or the corporations. He has to implement Islamic law and what Allah ordered. Even if he doesn't like something in it, he has to do that. So you can't be corrupt in an Islamic society. That's why the Taliban won their war in Afghanistan, because they're not known to be corrupt, while the previous Afghan administration, supported by the U.S., was corrupt. So that's another benefit to Islamic law. And then the punishments, right? We punish our criminals. The thief gets his hand cut off, and there's exceptions, right? If he's stealing because of necessity, like hunger, or it's a small amount, very small, tiny amount, then he doesn't get punished. And then there's the adulteresses and adulterers. They get punished with stoning, because they could contract an STD and pass it to their spouse, right? And how much hardship would that cause? And it defames the family, etc., etc. Apostasy is punished in Islam with death penalty, because Islam, the main priority of Islamic law is to safeguard and preserve Islam as a unifying force in the region. And when you have apostates advertising and trying to convince other people to become apostates, it's kind of like treason. It's like in America, if you're advocating for another country and you're working towards another country, you're arrested and charged with treason and put to death. So it's the same in Islamic society. And Islam only punishes the public sins, right? You can't be punished unless you're caught doing it publicly, right? If you're quiet about being an apostate, no one's gonna ever know. If you're doing adultery and homosexuality in your own house, no one's gonna know. But if you somehow do it and there's 4 male witnesses, or there's video evidence or a self-admission, then you're not doing it privately. You're trying to spread the sin. You're trying to encourage other people to do it. Homosexuality spreads a lot of diseases like HIV, monkeypox, and is scientifically proven to spread STDs quicker and contract quicker than from normal fornication, which is fornication is punished with 100 lashes, because when you have an immoral, highly sexualized society, that causes a lot of problems, as you're seeing in America. Erectile dysfunction at an early age, women being used and manipulated. Imagine your own daughter or your mother doing these things. You wouldn't feel good about that, right? So chastity is protected in society. And there's a lot of other things, like Islamic law is not nuanced. Like the main thing is justice. There's justice. The murderers, like I explained earlier, are punished. And these punishments are harsh and public, so that it encourages other people not to do them, right? If you punch someone in the face, and the law of the land is now that person gets to punch you back in the face as a punishment equally, people are not gonna want that. They're gonna obviously, there will be less crime. It's scientifically, in that sense, it's been proven that Islamic law reduces crime much more than the highly crime rampant areas in democracy, right? There's some areas in America that people can't even access. It's walled off. You can't go there because the criminals run the region. So same like with the cartels and the bandits over in Mexico. The government doesn't even have control over some of their territories because of these criminals. I'm trying to think of some of the things. Under Islamic law, we would enforce the hijab. As I mentioned, that's the first step to a society becoming immoral and highly sexualized. When women start walking around naked and tempting men, it leads to a lot of adultery, a lot of STDs. The families are broken, and et cetera, et cetera. Let me see if I'm missing anything here. And democracies, I think I mentioned this earlier, but they can be infiltrated. So someone can, become a naturalized citizen in the country, and they could be serving another country, kind of like what Israel is doing in America. They have infiltrated the government, and now they use the resources that we Americans have. They tax us a lot, and they use it against our interests and for the interests of another country. So it could be infiltrated. So yeah, this is just a little bit. It's a big discussion. There's a lot of lectures on YouTube that talk about Islamic law more in depth, but I just wanted to answer this question. Assalamu alaikum.